Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Back with another one. It's Great Minds Tutorials. And in this episode, I'm going to be showing you a simple exercise on how to determine ugly numbers. Okay, so let us just get on back to the theory. Back to the basic roots of mathematics. What is an ugly number? An ugly number is a number that is completely divisible by the number 2, 3, and 5. Oh, so what I'm just saying is that it's got a common factor, which is either a 2, a 3, or 5, or 2, 3, or 5 combined. Let me just go to Paint and try and demonstrate to you what an ugly number is, and then we're going to create an application based on that. So let's say you are having the number which is 13. So if you are having the number 13, if you go and do a long division on the number 13, if you decide, remember, only common factors, which is a 2, a 3, or a 5, then we can classify it as an ugly number. And then now, if you check this number 13, if you try and divide it by 2, it's not completely divisible. If you divide it by 3, it's not completely divisible. And if you divide it by 5, it's not completely divisible. You can only divide it by 13 until you get it, what you call. It only has got one common factor, which is 13, and then you're going to get a 1. So this is not an ugly number. This is not an ugly number. So, okay, let's say you are having the number, which is, let me see if you are having the number which is let us use the number which is a 10, and then if you were to divide a 10 by 2, you're going to get a 5, and if you continue on dividing here with a 5, you're going to get a 1, and then a 2 and a 5 will work. And then as you can see, a 10 is actually, yes, this is actually an ugly number. So what we're trying to do is that we're trying to develop an application that is going to be able to determine a number as an ugly number after a user has entered that number. So, okay, first things first, we need to do a scanner class. Scanner class. So I'm gonna do a scanner sc new scanner. So remember, guys, if you want information on basic programming, I do have a playlist which is dealing with basic Java programming. If you can go through that playlist, if you're new in Java programming, you're going to be able to check out all of the methods which I'm going to be using in this video. All right, so you're going to do system.in. I'm not going to explain what I'm doing. I do all of this in the I do all of this in the playlist which I'm talking about. I'm going to leave a link below to the first episode. So you just have to go through that playlist, continue with episode number 2 until the last one in order for you to build up on the knowledge. Only if you're new in Java programming. If you're not new, you can continue. So, okay, after doing my scanner, then I'm going to import my scanner up there. And then I'm going to take in the number. So I'm gonna do a boolean, which is ugly. So I'm gonna check if it's ugly, and then I'm gonna make it a true. And after doing this, then I want to scroll down. Okay, but it's fine. We'll continue with it as we go down. And then I'm just gonna prompt the user, prompt entry. So upon prompting entry, then I'm just gonna tell the user, please enter the number you want to check if it's an ugly number. Okay. I just want it to appear on the same line. And then now I'm going to say num it's sc.nextInt. Why? Because I'm going to be inputting an integer. So now after doing this, we cannot work with negative numbers. We need to work with positive numbers. So meaning that we must work with numbers from 0 up until infinity. So in order for us to control that, we're going to use an if statement. Then I'm going to say if my num is greater than or equals to 0, then I'm going to work on it. Other than that, I'm going to just give an else. I'm going to say invalid entry. So in this case, if a negative number has been input, I'm going to say invalid input. I'm just going to give an error message. So inside here, after when I found a number, then what I would want to do is I will then want to say that while, so remember, whenever you're working with a long division, you will divide until you get a 1. You will divide until you get a 1 whenever you're working with long division. So now what I'm going to be doing is that every time whenever I divide, when I go to the next one, I'm going to equate this as my num. My num, the one that I'll be getting, number which I'm going to be getting from the user, it's going to be a 10. So after when I've divided, I want to change my number from a 10, then it's now going to become a 5. So meaning that I have to update it here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to use control structure, which is your iteration control structure. So the iteration control structure that I'm going to be using here, I'm going to be using a while loop. So let me just quickly go back to my Netbeans. So I'm going to say while num is not equals to 1. So as soon as it hits a 1, I want this program to stop running. So now what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be checking if it's divisible by a 5, by a 3, by a 2. That is it for it to be an ugly number. So and then now I'm going to say if then num, I check the remainder. When I say modulus 5, it means that you will check if if you divide by a 5, do you get a remainder which is 0. So we want to check if it's equals to 0. Then in that case, if the remainder is a 0, then I want to change the number. Then the number must be number divided by a 5. I want to divide that number by 5. So meaning that I want to do this part which is on the left-hand side of your long division, which is this section. I want to do this section. I want to divide the number, but since I'm here, I was checking if it's divisible by 2 remainder, how much, and then now completely divisible by 2 years, but it gives you you're gonna get a 5. And then now what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to cater for this number which is a 5. In order for me to get a 5, I need to divide by this 2. So in this case, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say that if it's divisible by a 5, I want to divide by a 5. But there is a shortcut in programming that you can use. Instead of you writing that num is assigned to num divided by 5, you can just write the divide this side. Shorthand writing. So or shorthand notation. So else if I want to check if again num is completely divisible by a 3 and it gives me a remainder which is a 0. Then in this case, then I'm going to say num is divided by equals to 3. Then I'm going to divide it by 3. So remember in Java programming, an integer divided by an integer will always give you an integer. So always remember that. So if num is completely divisible by 2 and it gives me a remainder which is a 0, then I'm going to say num 2 like that. So this should be sufficient in order for us to say that, okay, so and then if it's either not divisible by 5, not divisible by 3, and not divisible by 2, then I want to say that that is definitely not an ugly number. So inside there, I want to say, this is not an ugly number. So, but then is ugly, which is my to verify, I'm then going to make it a false, meaning that it's ugly. I'm going to change it to a false, but by default, it was a true up there. So after when I've completely divided and I've found a 1, then it means that I will have completely found that that is an ugly number, meaning that if it can be divisible by a 5, divisible by a 3, and divisible by a 2 completely, it means that once I hit the 1, it's going to exit this while loop. So it means outside this while loop, then it means I will have found here, I found that it's an ugly number in the stage. So now what I want to do, I can only check that using the if statements. And then I'm going to say if is ugly. If is ugly has never changed from being a true, I equate it to a true. Then, even if I do not equate it to a true, for as long as I say this is ugly, as long as it's a true, it's always going to go inside there. Then we're going to write that the number is an ugly number. There is something that we need to do. So in this case, it will find that it is not an ugly number, but it will not stop iterating. Why? Because it is not going to get to this one here. So let's say we have a number which is a 13. So if we say a 13, is it divisible by a 5? No. Is it divisible by this? No, it's not divisible by that. Then we're going to get that 13, and then we're going to say that it's not an ugly number. But is 13 is equals to 1? No. This is where we're going to get an infinite loop. So in order for us to stop the infinite loop, so here we're saying we want to stop the infinite loop. How do you stop the infinite loop? We just have to break. So immediately after when I found out that the number is not an ugly number, I'll just have to break. So this should be sufficient in order for it to work and do the job for us. So now, in this case, I'm going to run the program. So, okay, let's start with a simple number. So the first number, which is a 1 by default should be an ugly number. So let's test a 1. Yes, 1 is an ugly number. Let's test a 2. A 2 should also be an ugly number. Why? Because 2 divided by 2 is divisible by a 2. 2 is an ugly number. But let's try a number like your 7. 7 shouldn't be an ugly number. So as you can see, it says that this is not an ugly number. So this is how you write a full program in order for you to check if a number is an ugly number or not. You will have to do, this is the only critical part. Whenever you get there, how you use your while loop, how you use your if statement and if else if inside there in order for you to check. Then in this case, if none of those hold, so this is why 1 is always an ugly number, is because once you put in input a 1, it's going to check if 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Yes, it will meet, it will go inside the statement. And then in this case, when it gets here, it will say 1 is equal to 1, it will just terminate the while loop, and then it will just go it will just terminate the while loop. But even if it's terminating the while loop, it will then go outside and check that the is ugly hasn't been changed from being a true. Then it will say that this is an ugly number, hence you're able to get it whenever it's a 1. So let us test the last thing, which is whenever we're working with a negative number, it should be able to give us an error. So as you can see, when you put in an invalid number, it's able to give you an error. So the first ugly number, so then let's go to Google and check what is an ugly number. So when we check here, so the definition of an ugly number is a positive number. So remember, positive number. Hence, there in our program, we made sure that our program only works with positive numbers. So it's an ugly number is a positive number whose prime factor is only a 2, a 3, and a 5. Only a 2, a 3, and a 5. No other prime factor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 we excluded, an 8 and a 9, a 10 and a 12. 11 is also excluded. Those are your first uh 10 prime 10 what you call ugly numbers. So just go and try this program on your own. And if you're facing any challenges, just comment down below. But remember to like, share, and subscribe. And till we drop the next one, I'm going to continue on dropping these exercises where we are implementing the basics that we were teaching in the series, or the playlist that we were doing on basic Java programming. So in this case, I'm using basic Java programming concepts. And currently, we are still releasing videos on our object-oriented programming language. And after, when we are done with our object-oriented programming language, we are going to be doing advanced object-oriented programming language in the Java language. Till the next one, cheers.